Hey everyone, welcome to Agritourism IQ. I'm Andrew, and I am so stoked to bring my good friend Dr. Trevor Lane to the show today. Trevor, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome. So a little bit of background on Trevor. We've been causing problems together for, I don't know, probably 7, 8 years now. I drove across the state about 7, 8 years ago because Trevor was talking about agritourism, and I was new to the space, and we hit it off. And he was the one person that I knew that was getting a doctorate in agritourism, and so it exists. He's out there. He did it. No one more informed on a lot of the things we're going to talk about today than Dr. Lane, and so I botched your background, how you got there is super interesting, Trevor. Why don't you start with that?
You bet. Thanks, Andrew. So the short version is I was raised on the family farm, spent summers there after we moved off. One of the things we found with agritourism is succession planning. Farm planning is a critical component to added value revenue, supplemental income. Farms are stressed and taxed, and so that extra revenue is critical. And that's where agritourism comes in. And agritourism, for those who may not really truly have a full grasp of what is it, because it's loosely defined. There's no one universal definition to really dial it in. It's anything that brings somebody to a farm for the purpose of entertainment or education. It's really truly that simple. And now you start to get into the argument of what, is it specifically, and all the policy that goes with that. But I was raised on the family farm, spent summers on the family farm. I got to see the stressors and the stresses, and I'm a product of a lack of farm succession planning. I moved to Washington to ranch and homestead and farm, and the ex-wife just didn't seem to want to agree with that notion. So here I am working in extension. I just signed on with Iowa State University after a 12-year career with Washington State University, and really rooting in 39 counties across 27 federally recognized tribes around this concept of agritourism. And it started with a festival that I sold in Oklahoma to come here. And so there's this connection between farm festivals, county fairs, community events that I'm very familiar with, and the impact that that has to our small business ecosystems in rural and tribal communities. And so that's really the 30,000-foot view without getting into the weeds and the nuances of
Oh,
all of
we'll
the
get into the weeds. Don't worry, brother. We're getting into the weeds. But let's start with your festival. And so you are again, so you understand the farming part of it full up, but you also understand the entertainment aspect because you've done it. Now one of the challenges a lot of my friends have with academics is they're, those that can't teach. That's not your case. You are a practitioner at heart. You've done it, and you're trying to bring what you experienced, polish it with some research. I think that's even better than saying academia. Is you polish it with research, and then kick it back out to the rest of us. But talk to us about your festival. I think that's super interesting.
So that experience in actually selling the festival, I started it with 300 people and a group of my friends on a ranch in the middle of a field, and it grew to over 10,000 attendees when I sold it. So we were doubling and tripling attendance every year. Food and festivals go hand in hand. So local food, regenerative ag, all those components with healthy food and nutrition, it dovetails in around the festival. So I sold that to come here. And then I wound up on the Washington Festivals and Events Association, which is how you and I met. I sit on their board, and I've helped with policy development and wordsmithing the different aspects of the historical side of legislative bills and their development. And so that's really where I anchored after selling the festival to come here, was with the Washington Festivals and Events Association. And then once I anchored there, uh, people went, "Oh my gosh, this guy in extension understands this stuff." And I wound up working with economic development centers and commerce and the governor's office. And that just kind of really spread out into the universe. And I've been speaking nationally and internationally. I just got back from Guam and speaking there about island tourism and how that can impact Southeast Asia and the US's role in this, forward thinking, forward security position with food resilience. So agritourism can play a big role with small business eco development and even, believe it or not, international politics.
Well, that is huge. We are definitely going to unpack policy here in a second. But talk to me a little about your doctorate, your program that you did at USC, and what that how that experience was for you, and what it resulted in for the industry.
So I don't tell a lot of people this, but I'm going to tell the world now. I'm a nerd, and I love to read journal articles, and organizational development is really one of the nerdy things that I enjoy reading the footnotes behind. And, stimulus response behavior, just as people perform and achieve results, so do organizations. And University of Southern California had a program in organizational change and leadership, and I was able to do my dissertation and the core and the bulk of my research around agritourism, specifically the promising practice of agritourism, because we have discovered that those small revenue streams uh, are huge to our small farm and middle-sized farm operators and ranchers. And I specifically unpacked what are the three challenges or barriers that challenge or preclude people from being able to participate in agritourism. Um, it's access to capital, liability, and I can't remember the third one off the top of my head.
Probably
But
lousy policy, but
yeah, it is. It's
policy
actually,
barriers. Yeah, no, I
yeah,
know we've talked about it, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. And so those three things are critical aspects of where I've spent my time teaching in the communities, because I'm not a classroom teacher. I'm research faculty, a social scientist. So I spend my time in the communities working with people like you, farmers, county officials, elected officials, community leaders, to unpack how to help our small farms overcome those challenges. How can you bootstrap a petting zoo, a pumpkin patch, a corn maze? What does that look like? And because I've done it, I've lived it. I seem to get a little bit more credibility, or street cred, as some folks call it, in trying to actually help people. And I move from the teaching component to the consulting side of things, and actually helping people improve their day-to-day operations.
Well, and I think this is another aspect that I find truly interesting is that you've also, so you're a professional edge walker. I don't know if your LinkedIn profile says that, but you are. Because the other things that I'll get is a text from you to say, "Hey, Andrew, can you come down and meet with T-Mobile down in Bellevue, or can and or Amazon wants this or that." And so you're dialed in on the industry side, and not the agritourism industry side. You're on tech and some of these other, and so having a foot in that world. Talk to us a little bit about what are the concerns, or the opportunities that, or frankly the investments that these big multinational companies, as you talk to them about agritourism or rural development, and economic resilience. What are those conversations like? What do they want? What are they seeing? What are their challenges? What are they afraid of?
Yeah, I get asked often, like, why are you working with Fortune 100 companies? Don't you know extension is rural based? And so let's talk about the urban and rural divide and a quick history lesson. One of the things that Extension did back in the 1930s was we played a critical role in the Electrification Act and electrifying rural communities and farms. And if you pay attention when you're driving down these small two-lane highways, you will notice in some instances that the power lines run along the highway, and the highway runs along the sides of farms. And if you look up, you'll see those power lines and those highways running right next to a barn. That's how they got power to the farm. And so fast forward to modern day, we need connectivity in these rural communities. And one of the things that I did before I came to Washington State University was micro credentials, the small certifications and stackable pathways that take people from technical training to the community colleges and then into our universities. And when I was brought here, in addition to, hey, you understand agritourism and farm festivals, we want you to figure out how to take all these extension workshops and learning and marry that with our academic programs. Industry, the Fortune 100 companies said, oh my gosh, you understand this. How do we get our people skilled and trained in this ecosystem while we're expanding broadband? So there's this connection between workforce development, broadband, and the role that extension plays in our rural communities. And entertainment is one foot through that door to helping stand up and prop up our rural communities that are struggling economically in a lot of different
I see.
ways. And so and I have the relationships. I've known people at Microsoft, Amazon, Google at some of the highest levels. I went to college with these folks. I grew up with some of these folks. They live in Washington in a lot of cases, ironically. And so the relationships that drive us in extension drove me into the Fortune 100 realm, and they saw opportunities to take their philanthropic investments, their grant programs, and Microsoft funded a micro-credentialing and upskilling project for me, alongside the broadband work that we were doing in Ferry County in Republic, Washington, a very remote location that, unless you've been there, you may not even know it exists. It's 20 miles south of the Canadian border. There's not even one blinking light in the entire county. I don't even think we have 20 stop signs I'm making that up, but it's a very remote location. And these Fortune 100 companies, as we look at the talent pipelines and workforce development and skilled workers, took an interest in that connection. And farms and ranches play a big role in that, and Extension is well positioned to serve that. So that's how some of those Fortune 100 relationships and those conversations around technology, upskilling, and broadband came about.
Awesome, awesome. And you're also dialed in on the academic side. Could you paint a picture for the agritourism operator of the academic structure that's around? And some, I mean, I know Penn State's involved and Vermont's involved, and I think North Carolina State's got some space, some putting some. What who's who in the zoo, and what are they working on?
So the universities you just described, they're really the leaders, with Washington State University being up there in that mix as well. Vermont does a really good job. Dr. Lisa Chase, Dr. Carla Barbieri at North Carolina State University. Those gals, if you don't know them, you're not doing agritourism, in my opinion.
Well, we'll get them
Um,
on the show. So
yeah,
put a
they
plug in.
I can't say enough fantastic things about those 2 ladies, and, really what I have found is the agritourism curriculum is mostly non-credit. Like, I'm working with Dr. Chase, on a credentialing program. So how do we get off-farm and on-farm people certified? Because people come in and out of this conversation, and they mean well, but they may or may not know or have a baseline understanding of what this is, and they, in the case of liability, you misinform a farmer and a cow steps on somebody, that could be an expensive lesson learned. So now we're into some of the policy development stuff, and as we look at the academic and non-credit pathways, that has led to the policy development stuff that I've been doing as well. So really what we're seeing is this non-credit pathway of extension providing workshops, outreach, consultations, farm visits, things like that. And the academic side seeing value in that curriculum, and how do we the conversation is how do we migrate, pull that all together. And the way we're doing that is through the tourism programs and the business administration, business management, academic programs, and we're seeing extension faculty work with academic faculty to try and kind of ferret that out. And that really, this conversation is back to the micro credentials conversation we were talking about earlier, and how do we stack those into pathways. And I like to use 4-H as a prime example of what that could look like. These 4-Hers are amazing, and anybody who's ever worked with 4-H youth knows, if they've ever had an animal project, the amount of work and detail that goes into that type of project. Why are we not giving them a 3-hour agribusiness elective and a $500 scholarship to recruit them and get them into the academic pipeline? Like, what is wrong with us? Why are we not doing that? And so people are sitting up going, why aren't we doing that? And I'm like, go team. And so there's this big synergy around agritourism, non-credit and credit. And the agritourism space and the food system space seems to be a way to really be drawing attention to this, because we all have to definitely do one thing: eat. We all have to do it. Food is a critical part of this conversation, and what a great way, other than entertaining and educating people through our farm systems, to create the gaps that COVID showed us about our food and supply chain. So that's really how that academic credit non-credit conversation is looking at a 30,000-foot view. And then just know this: it gets very political, driven by egos. At that point, when you get into the weeds, it is a very complex conversation that gets very loud if you're not careful.
And this is my surprise face that it gets political, but I want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. And so, when I talk to people about the background, because I'm also a nerd when it comes to this stuff. I think when I got into the agritourism space, that's what I was doing. I was looking around for those industry experts, and they were not easy to find. It was not well organized like a lot of other industries that I've been a part of. And so that's really one of the reasons that we're kicking off Agritourism IQ, is we're trying to make it easier for people to do smarter things on their farms. But it really, for me, there's kind of this trifecta of there's the horticulture, right? There's the hospitality, and then there's the hustle, and that's the business part. And so if you don't have all three of those, you're on borrowed time, for an agritourism, endeavor. Frankly, and I'm glad to hear. But that is, those are the three different pathways. You can like pick two and source out the other, as long as it's not hospitality, because you're not going to be able to, if you're really good at growing, you're really good at the hustle, but you're stuck in a commodity mindset, then you're really going to be on really hurt for certain. Talk to us a little bit about the economics of experience with based in you both in your research and then in your background for the rural audience.
You know, farming's hard work. Owning and running a small business is hard work, and it's also very rewarding. And it's the rewarding piece where helping people overcome those barriers that we were talking about with liability policy, access to capital. When you help people step through that spectrum, you have to have a basic level of understanding with small business, and farmers naturally and inherently know what those things are. And when you get into the technical components of hospitality and tourism, like learning to run a spreadsheet, learning to keep records, they do a lot of that stuff in their head. I've seen farmers run spreadsheets on their bushels per acre just in their head, down to the dime, but ask them for that Excel spreadsheet, good luck. So this is where, the relationships with Fortune 100 companies come in, because they have products and things that can help farmers achieve those aims, and collecting that data and really doing business at a more technical level than just, it's not as simple as put a seed in the ground and put water on it. And they do a lot of that stuff in their head, and a lot of that science and those technical components of farming and ranching. But on the business side, that's where the struggle is sometimes, because farmers don't have a lot of extra time. So when do they sit down to total up all their receipts and put them in a spreadsheet and fill out that USDA, data report, like all of those technical components, and that goes with agritourism as well. So now you've added one more thing to driving revenue that comes with very specific requirements, and making sure that they have the support that they need to know what those basic tools are. And depending on what they're doing, as to how technical and how layered that conversation is. It's different. Just like you're different, I'm different, communities are different. Agritourism operators, their aspects are always different as well. So really having my experience of having run a farm festival, multiple county fairs, state fairs, community events, I'm able to go in and help them really sort through, okay, here's how you need to manage your ticketing. Here's how you need to manage your books. Here's how you can use AI to scan all of your receipts, and it'll total them up for you and categorize them. And so that's where I find a lot of value in helping our small farm operators, and then putting together the workshops to bring a group of folks together.
So I'm glad you touched on that, because nobody's got a crystal ball, but you spend a lot of time futurizing, and leaning into what's coming next. What are those tools, and so both tools and relationships, and I would even go far as to say models, that current agritourism operators should start to wrap their heads around.
That's a good question. And I think the answer resides in what you said a little bit earlier, is this industry is not easy to navigate. And for those of us who've been in it a while, we know who each other are. Like I know you, we know Lisa and Carla, we know the university system, we know the communities that are rapidly getting out there. And I would say that Tennessee does a good job, Vermont does a great job, North Carolina State does wonderful work, Kentucky does good job, California is really good in the agritourism space. And believe it or not, Washington State is leading in that conversation as well. And so I point these things out because those are the communities we should be looking to see what are the operators doing. And the two trends that I see in terms of innovation and technology we're doing right now: podcasting, streaming, live streaming, posting, social media, those things, and there's no one model, there's not one formula. Everybody does it a little bit different, has different aspects that they incorporate with their farm or their operations. But really, at a high level, those are the communities, those are the technologies that people need to be looking to. And more importantly, they need to be thinking about, how do I automate those things? How can I go in and set it up so that it just runs seamlessly, but credibly? Because there are people out there who don't just buy the garbage that's flooded. And then thinking about, what is the role of artificial intelligence in this as well? And I have to make sure that I say artificial intelligence, because some of my ranch operators, I say AI, and it takes on a whole different conversation. We speak two different languages. And
Sure.
so I will have to say artificial intelligence, that AI, because what is the role of AI as we think about things? Because AI is like a buddy that can help with some of the digital, innovative, heavy lifting if it's leveraged right.
So the 800-pound gorilla in the agritourism room, not our room because we talk about it all the time, is policy, right? We have in with the exception, I think, of Missouri and Texas, I don't have a single agritourism friend who isn't pulling their hair out. Those seem to be a couple of the states that have really just said, you know what, you have at it. Everyone else is got there's conversations and constraints, but the challenge I think that I see, and again has been is facing me, like, personally, and as with my county, and I know in Oregon there was a this summer there was a giant kerfuffle about policy and what you can and can't do. Can you paint for us kind of the just this the scene of what it is that how it is that policy, what policy is trying to do, what it's actually doing, and what it is that we can do as operators to create enough space to be able to run our farms in a way that is profitable.
So this conversation really began about 12 years ago when I first came to the state of Washington. And so I'll just tell a story about what we've seen in Washington state. And my introduction to this conversation through the Washington Festivals and Events Association as a board member was, hey, we've got a guy that understands this. Would you work with these legislators? And so I worked with a small handful of legislators and agritourism operators to begin to, because there's no definition, as we said earlier, to begin to define what are agritourism activities, agritourism events. This conversation led to actual codified statutes. And it was a direct result of the liability that we see happening, and alongside the growth and a group of people who wanted our farms. So the intent was good, right? The intent's always good with policy, and then it turns into something else. And the intent was to indemnify and reduce liability for our agritourism operators, because there were instances where people were going onto farms and getting hurt, or tractors killing people.
Right. And yeah, now I think there's like 42 states now or more that have
Right.
similar
We were among the
indemnification.
first states to
Right.
lead that charge. That conversation right there has spread into a variety of different policy things around liability, land use, land management, farm planning, farm succession, because we're losing our farms at an alarming rate. So as we try to prop up our farms, and alongside the loss of farm land, how do we protect our farmers to encourage them to want to do more, to educate people? Because food, we agreed, it's critical. We all have to do it. So how do we create that ecosystem of learning and entertainment to get people to understand the critical importance of our farms? And agritourism and policy development has been one way. Um, but just like with anything, you put a policy in place. Now somebody wants to define the definition behind the words. And now we're into this weird space at a county and local level of what is and what isn't agritourism, because you've got traffic jams, you've got tractors that can't get to their land, you've got people blocking streets and farm entrances and impeding just operations in general. So, what does this mean alongside farm loss, liability, and all of those things? And we don't have a crystal clear definition of what agritourism is. And so, backing up to how I got into this, it was around agritourism activities, and somebody was demanding that we build, alongside farm weddings, barn weddings, pumpkin patches, corn mazes, petting zoos. They wanted to add BMX tracks, and I went, "That's not agritourism." I
Yeah. Where's
I
where's the agricultural nexus, right?
you know, and I will say, I pride myself in having a growth mindset, and I have evolved my thinking around, "Heck no, that's not agritourism," to, "Well, that might help improve agritourism, because what do you do when you've got ground that can't be farmed, it can't be managed or operated, it's just sitting there with rocks, it's not arable, it's not farmable, like, there's nothing you can do with it but a BMX track, and a $250,000 BMX weekend could help the farm with new crops, maybe build a farm stand or a farm Airbnb or something like that. So I've had to adjust my thinking a little bit because our farms are hurting and they need more
Yeah.
revenue,
Well,
you
to
know?
your point of the festival, right? There's not necessarily an agricultural nexus to a
Right,
music festival.
right.
But then you've got communities that are saying, "Look, we don't want a concert venue on farmland, or we don't want BMX or paintball or some of these other things that were like, hey, cheap land, let's go." There's got to be for me, I just keep coming back to that nexus, and it sounds to me like that there are states, and Oregon and Washington are right up there, where the pendulum is swinging so hard towards production agriculture. If you're not production agriculture plus, maybe you can have some people on your farm, then you don't get to play. You don't. It's a hard zoning issue. From a policy perspective, they're saying if it's not production agriculture, we don't want to play. And as you pointed out, production agriculture, the fact of the matter is we're 10 times more efficient than we were when most of these laws were, from a production perspective, than when these laws were enacted. And the current state of the economy in rural communities is such that we need to have a look and see for the non-productive land, what can we do with it? Those are hard conversations to have because everybody wants to paint it with the same with a wide brush, and we're not getting there. I mean, I have very good friends in Oregon that are just they're threatened to be shut down by their county, and they absolutely do right up the middle agritourism. They got a farm, they've got a farm stand. Yes, they have a play area, but it's incidental to the production of agriculture, and they want all of anything that isn't production cut out. And if your farm stand isn't selling only what you grow, then shut it down, which is just, I fail to see the policy. Like, you're going to be more of an objective. Like, what are these, what's the opposition thinking?
Well, a lot of it is they have, in my opinion, based on experience, they have zero connection to farming. They have not grown up on a farm. They don't understand what it means to get up when the rooster crows and to go to bed when the sun goes down, and the grit that it takes to run a farm, and that disconnect to the added value products and services and these incidental, indirect things that you just described. Why can't I sell batteries and flashlights for my corn maze to have a night session?
So I mean, you've worked quite a bit with the legislator. What are legislators? What do they want to hear? They don't want to hear. I mean, they know mom and pop farmer, the great American hope. But what is it that's useful that we can take to our legislatures to try and I say legislatures because a lot of it's at the state level. I know at the county level it's a whole other knife fight, but for in working with the legislature, what have you found that is successful? What is it
This is where,
what are some of
yeah,
the
this
efforts?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this speaks to the heart of, why I wave my pom-poms for extension on a regular basis. This is where extension wins. This is where extension has an opportunity to demonstrate its relevance in this conversation because we have the relationships with the farmers. We know what the issues, the needs, the challenges, and the opportunities are, and it's extension's opportunity to get out there and get those elected officials on the farm. Because when a farmer is walking the orchard where the fruits are being picked at 2 o'clock in the heat of the afternoon, they get a whole new understanding of what that means for affordable labor and what that means for efficient operations and water and soil needs and soil challenges, traffic. Like they get a real feel. And this is what Extension does well: farm tours, farm walks, workshops, and actually getting our elected officials on the ground in the trenches, so to speak, in a very hands-on, informed fashion. And that's what Extension does best. We create that bridge to and around our farms. And I think the more that Extension can, you know, service that outreach conversation of getting people on the farms is where the win is. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing is Extension needs to be playing a role in the state ag departments, as well as the agricultural committees that our legislature relies on, making sure that we have faculty and students and people that are working hands-on and directly with our farms and ranches to get into those conversations, because we have knowledge and information that's often left out of those conversations and not considered. And so those are the first two things. And then the third thing, given the environment of where we are with our farms and ranches disappearing, is being loud to bring attention to that voice. Because like we said, food, without it we're all going to starve and go hungry. And so Extension and our allies need to get very hands on, a little bit louder, and more engaged.
Sure. So, Extension helps me get some elected officials on my farm. Now they're there. What do I need to show them? What do I need to tell them? I mean, I don't need the backslapping. I've got plenty of pictures with my the governor or whatever. Well, I need them to go to work for me. How do I do that?
So this is where hands-on learning can play a role. When we think about skilling and competencies, what are we doing to give them that experiential lesson, that teaching, that training, that education, to put gloves in their hands, get them on their knees to dig some soil, pull some weeds, put some seeds in the ground, run an irrigation pipe. Oh my gosh, let somebody do that for 5 minutes and they'll have a new appreciation for what soil and irrigation and watering our crops looks like. So I think the more that we can do to create these experiential moments, and I also see this as an opportunity to laud what 4-H does. How do we get these elected officials into the 4-H environment and around these 4-H kids? Because these kids, we had a program called Tech Changemakers, where kids were teaching adults how to use technology and how to upskill things. And I looked up and I had a group of community leaders who knew nothing about technology, and they actually didn't know anything about farming and ranching either. So these farm kids who were teaching grown-ups how to use laptops, technology, how to navigate setting up Gmail and use a browser and turn on a laptop. That's a thing. I didn't know that. But at the same time, how to do that in a barn. And oh, I don't have Wi-Fi, so we got to go up next to the house. Oh, we don't have broadband, so now I've got to turn on my hotspot on my T-Mobile so I can show you how to turn on the laptop to connect to your Gmail to set that up, and we're on the farm while we do this. So I think 4-H Extension, there's an opportunity to create these experiential moments where our elected officials and our community leaders are actually hands-on, skilling, building their own competencies to understand what we see happening. Like when I leave this conversation today, part of the reason I'm dressed the way I am, I'm going to Sheber Farms to talk to him about his farm tour, to talk to him about his farm walk. What wheat seeds and what wheat things are we going to present to our elected officials while we have them here this spring? So I think that's going to be a critical piece of getting them hands-on in the trenches with their hands in the soil, because there's something magic that happens when people have to put their hands in dirt that creates a whole level of understanding.
All right, Dr. Lane, one last question. What does smarter agritourism look like to you?
Work smarter, not harder, right? So for me, what that means is, how do you leverage technology in a way to create efficiencies? Um, and make your life more manageable. I know when I'm staring at my phone 24/7, it's not because I'm doom scrolling on TikTok. It's because I'm checking emails and chats that are coming in, and I'm putting things on my calendar so that I can look at a week from now and go, "Oh my God, I don't know when I'm going to come have lunch with you because I'm full for the next 3 weeks." But using technology as a tool and not a toy, that is where I think a lot of agritourism operators, farmers could win, and figuring out how to upskill towards those efficiencies because I'm not kidding you when I said earlier there are people who don't know how to turn on a laptop. That and there's more of that than we may realize. Um, and nobody's immune from that conversation. I don't care if you're in the city or if you're in a rural or tribal community. There's a lot of upskilling that could be taking place. And I think that, when we think about smarter ag, smart ag, um, when we look at our tractors, one of the things that we were dealing with at Sheber Farms is the technology that goes into these tractors and these combines now. If you don't know how to code and program
Huh.
that sensor that just went out on you,
John Deere's a software company now. I mean,
right?
let's call it what
Correct.
it is. It's it's SaaS, right? And so yeah,
It's
I'll take
software as a
my.
service.
It is,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, no kidding.
So that's, I think, where the efficiencies and smarter ag can come in is what are we doing to upskill? Because when I sat at the co-op with Don Schieber from Schieber Farms, I was the youngest person in the room. And I asked them, what are we doing to skill the next generation? And the whole room went silent. And I was not expecting a silver bullet answer, but I also was not expecting silence. And there were no answers about non-credit to credit pathways, apprenticeships, internships, experiential learning, hands-on learning. FFA and 4-H didn't even enter the room. So when we think about sustainability and farm succession planning, there's a whole conversation around this innovation and efficiency smarter ag component that we're talking about. And the colleges and universities that win while enrollment is taking it on the chin and the value of a university education is being questioned now more than ever, that is something where the colleges and universities that address that component will win. What are we doing to skill the next generation of farm workers so that they can actually know what wrench to get out of the toolbox? I knew education was in trouble when I had a greenhouse project and we were using Bitcoin miners to heat them during the winter to recycle, reuse, and repurpose energy. So you pay for it once, use it 3 times. And I had to get these raised beds filled with soil and fertilizer and all the things that go with growing food. And I had a student who didn't know how to use a shovel.
It's the
I
pointy end.
mind-boggling to me,
Yeah,
and that's
that's
just one
great.
of many examples when we
Sure.
think about efficiencies and skilling and smarter ag. What are we doing to upskill the next generation? So, yeah.
Awesome. Great. So, Trevor, somebody's listening to this and they're like, look, I really need to talk to that guy. How do people get a hold of you now, especially now that you moved east on us?
So the easy answer is, Trevor Lane, has his own website, and I like talking in the third person, so Trevor at trevorlane.com. And you can find me because I'm in the transition between Washington State University and Iowa State University. I start in my new job next week. And that's just the easy way to get a hold of me, in and around this conversation is Trevor at trevorlane.com.
Awesome. Trevor, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. I can't wait to connect at the next conference. And of course, we'll get thrown out of whatever room we find ourselves in because that's what disruptors do. But all the best to you in your new adventure and keeping Guam from sinking and all that other good stuff that you're about. More technology there. But thank you so much for sharing your insights here on Agritourism IQ.
Andrew, it was a pleasure. I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be seen and heard. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thanks, Trevor. All right, that's all we've got today for Agritourism IQ. Remember, smarter agritourism starts with you. Thanks.